before we get started, I do want to mention that Hasselblad did in fact send me the XCD 90mm lens along with their X2D 100C to test it out, take some photos, and make a YouTube video sharing my thoughts. But as per usual, all the thoughts and opinions that I share on this channel are my own. The 90V is a portrait lens designed for the Hasselblad medium format system, and it has a 35mm equivalent field of view of around 70mm when you include that crop factor, because the medium format sensor is quite a bit larger than full frame, and it also has a maximum aperture of f2.5. This month I was lucky enough to take the camera and lens to Japan, where I shot a whole bunch of different subjects, different scenarios, and different lighting situations to see what this lens is made of. And that's an immediate segue into the build and construction of the 90V. It is completely made of metal. There is no plastic here, all the way down to the metal lens hood and even the metal lens cap. It does have a nice weight to it, but it's not too cumbersome. And that's due in large part to its quite compact size, especially for a medium format lens. Remember, with medium format, we have to cover a much larger image circle because the sensor is much larger than 35mm. As a portrait photographer, I love having a wide range of focal lengths in my bag, from something as wide as a 24mm all the way up to a 100mm lens. And honestly, I think this is just such a flattering focal length for portraits. It has that beautiful compression that a telephoto lens gives you without being too zoomed in, which is often what I felt about the 85mm focal length or even the 135. So even though this is technically a 90mm lens, as I mentioned before, because of that reverse crop factor, it actually resembles more like a 70mm lens in full frame terms. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you might remember that back in February of this year, I did a full portrait shoot on a 65mm lens, and I quickly fell in love with this focal length. So this is not too far off in terms of its field of view. On the medium format sensor, this focal length just has such a pleasing look to it, and you can see by these examples that I'm showing on the screen. I never felt too far away from my subject. Even when I was shooting a full body portrait, I was still, within the distance where I don't actually have to yell at them to, give instructions for the posing and stuff like that. And it was definitely really easy to get a nice close-up. You're not too close to your subject. Sometimes when you're taking a photo of somebody and you're really close with a wider angle lens, it can be a bit intimidating, a bit daunting. With the 90mm, you're actually a really good distance away for a nice close-up. So talking about image quality, as you have probably already seen by the samples that I've shown so far, this lens is crazy sharp. It's almost too sharp, the way that it is able to resolve a crazy amount of detail when paired up with the 100 megapixel X2D camera. And I'm not a huge fan, it's not my number one priority to have the, most clinically sharp lens in the world on my camera at all times. But zooming in on these photos in Lightroom, the results really did blow me away. And honestly, I kind of get the appeal of having a lens like this, especially if you are going to be doing some cropping with your images. As a matter of fact, the photo that I'm showing you on the screen right now is not a close-up, it's actually a full body photo that I cropped in to resemble a close-up photo. And I think that speaks for itself, really. So wide open at 2.5, you get some of the most beautiful backgrounds I've ever seen out of a portrait lens. The bokeh is really smooth and it's really not distracting at all. Even though it's a 70mm equivalent in full frame terms, the bokeh looks kind of reminiscent of what you would get out of like a 70 to 200 or something like that. Now, as a photographer, I'm definitely someone who has a little more of a fast-paced style. And for that reason, it did take me a little bit of time to adjust to the style of the X2D. It definitely is well suited to environments where you can really take your time to get the shot right. It's definitely not going to be able to burn through 20 frames per second with perfect autofocus. You have to remember, it is 100 megapixels. The face detect autofocus system, which is a brand new feature of the new firmware for the X2D, which I will be making a full video on that coming up on the channel soon, is really accurate. But as I said, you do need to take your time to make sure that you get the shot perfectly in focus. This is really a camera for photographers who are creating art and not covering live events or sports. So going back to the design of the lens itself, and like everything Hasselblad, it's very clean and quite minimal. The markings are super clear and straightforward. The metal lens hood clicks very satisfyingly into place. And by far, my favorite thing about the design of the lens is this manual focus clutch. I don't know if you can see that, but simply by pulling forward on that manual focus ring, now you have access to manual focus, and it automatically switches the camera body into manual focus. And it is just really nice to turn. I let a few of my photographer friends play around with the lens, and I made a point of showing them all this feature. You have this indicator on the screen, which is super nice, that shows you when the image is in focus. And while I did use the lens most of the time in the autofocus mode, it was really cool to see a really nice user experience integrated into the system for people who still love to focus manually. The aperture ring has a really nice click to it, and also has a switch on the barrel of the lens that you can flick in order to make the ring clickless as well, which is a nice addition. So frankly, the 90V is not a lens that is going to fit every budget. Like many things that are built to an extremely high standard, there is a price tag that comes with it, and by no means do you have to buy this lens to take great photos. But if you're someone who really values the workmanship, optical quality, and design in your lenses, then this might be the best tool for you. As a prime lens, it's a little bit of a different focal length. If you're used to the staple focal lengths like 50, 85, and 135 in the full frame standard, then it might take a little getting used to. The best way I can explain it is sort of a collaboration between a 50mm lens and an 85mm lens. And that was sort of my takeaway from using the 65mm lens on a full frame camera. If you are a photographer that shoots a lot of headshots, maybe you shoot headshots for actors or models, or even profile photos for business people, and you want the absolute best image quality with super smooth bokeh and amazing resolution, this lens is honestly really hard to beat. This has to be one of the best portrait lenses I've ever tried. So that's it for this video. I want to thank you guys for sticking around. I also want to say a massive thank you to Hasselblad for sending me the system and letting me try out the camera and lens. As I mentioned, I have another video, a full review of the Hasselblad X2D coming out in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for that. So thanks once again, guys, and I'll see you all in the next video.